Hi there, welcome to DM's U&I Podcast. This week I'm joined by Beth Motley, who is at DM now, heading up our Stakeholder Engagement. So I'm going to be talking to her about who she is and what she's going to be doing at DM. So listen on. So welcome, Beth. I think it'd be really good if you could just give people a kind of little bit of a CV of you, where you come from over the years. And so we'll then come back and talk about why you're at DM.
Cool. So I spent the last 20 years working at specialist comms consultancies, working across the built environment. The agency I came from was County Context. And prior to that, I spent 18 years working for Camargue. So I've worked across a range of sectors, construction, transport, waste, energy and utilities, predominantly delivering stakeholder engagement and comms in respect of developments that are coming forward and looking to get consented. So NSIPs, TCPA.
What made you, in the first instance, get interested in stakeholder engagement?
Do you really want the answer to that?
Yeah.
So I actually started off my career in children's publishing.
Okay.
And having done literature degrees.
Yeah.
However, kind of got to the point where it's like, I'm just flogging product. I'm just literally flogging books. And so despite being passionate about that, made a conscious decision to move into corporate and B2B comms, where it's much more issues driven, it's much more relevant sort of to day, and ended up working in the built environment. So kind of being involved in getting something up and out of the ground, from sort of planning through to manufacturers who are developing and manufacturing the widgets, and end of life of those buildings and structures. And it was much more issues driven, relevant to kind of the things that affect you and I day to day, and sort of future generations.
I never looked back since you made that decision.
No.
Good. And I mean, your previous experience, obviously, you worked with some of the big boys, in the stakeholder engagement world, and so you must have been involved in some quite exciting projects.
Yeah, I've had some.
Give us some highlights and lowlights. The projects you've been involved with.
I mean, the first. So I've been involved in projects sort of from the falling out of the planning out 2008 since about. I'm sure someone will correct me. I think about 2011, the first big NSIP that I got involved with was National Grid's North West Coast Connections project. So that was delivering the grid connection to the nuclear that was designated as being built by Sellafield, so NewGen. So that was, I think it was 120 mile, 400 kV double circuit grid connection, crossed 2 different county boundaries. At one point there was about 12 different Westminster constituencies. I think the numbers of parish councils went over 100.
Yeah.
So it was a big meaty project. And watched the team grow from strategic optioneering stage through to route alignment. And it was a project that ultimately didn't go ahead because Toshiba pulled out of the NewGen joint venture. But it was a really exciting project because it was sort of a scale that was sometimes kind of, you get a sense of vertigo, this is really big.
Yeah.
But in terms of tapping into kind of like, we need to keep the lights on and that whole story and the knee case and the drivers, it was really exciting. And working alongside some fantastic consultants as well across all the disciplines.
Including us, obviously.
Including Dalcour Maclaren. That's where I first started working with Dalcour.
Yeah.
I've been involved with Heathrow in terms of expansion and airspace, which ultimately got sort of kicked into the long grass with the judicial review in January 2020, just before we went into lockdown, and then done a lot of work on solar DCOs and solar NSIPs, what I'd kind of think is from second wave onwards. I wasn't involved with Cleve, which I think was the first solar DCO, but that second wave, so I worked on Gate Burton, which is now consented, that came forward alongside Sonica and the IGP projects up in Lincolnshire and Mallard Pass, and a lot of solar subsequently in terms of other schemes that are coming through both at TCPA and NSIP level. Okay,
now my next question is going to be about DM, but before we get to DM in terms of why on earth are you here, because you're obviously not surveying, or being an environmental consultant, but I think one of the things I think be good just for people to understand is real clarity on what actually stakeholder engagement means when we talk about it here at DM. So, just very quickly, and we don't need warts and all, but just quick kind of overview of, actually what is it that you do for a project?
So I think everyone's involved in stakeholder engagement. Anyone who is engaging with individuals who have an interest in a project or an entity coming forward. So the work that's done at DM across the land and property teams and environmental and planning teams, they are engaging with stakeholders, generally on a more technical or site-specific basis. Yeah. I guess what I do, the point of difference is that I'm engaging with stakeholders. Often there's a crossover in those stakeholders, but more generally from a reputational perspective and public public perception of projects that are being developed in terms of getting wider input into the design of the schemes that are coming forward. That is a fairly kind of blunt explanation of stakeholder engagement that I get.
Yeah, so I guess you're looking at community engagement, and you're also looking at high level sort of MP, councillors, that kind of stuff as well.
I mean, sort of from a community level. So putting it in context of an NSIP project, I'm dealing with Section 47, so communities who have an interest or potentially affected by a project, but all of their representatives as well, those people who represent the interests of those communities. So you've got your Westminster MPs, your local elected members, your parish councils, the media. I always think of the media as being a stakeholder in a project because they are a conduit to transfer of information and providing information to a wider audience about what's happening and how they can get involved.
Yeah. And I think the other misconception that I think maybe a lot of people have out there is our clients all take this exceptionally, it's a really important part of their whole programme, and they're not just doing it to tick a box. In the today's world, they have to listen and they have to take on board what's being said.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting actually, because I spent an inordinate amount of my career stood in village halls talking to local communities about a project, and generally speaking, the people who take part in public consultation on big developments coming forward, they're self-selecting, and they tend to be self-selecting on the grounds that they don't like all their... they're not particularly supportive of what is being proposed. Now, the one thing that comes across time and again is this is just a tick box exercise. Yeah. And the one thing I reply time and again, this is not a tick box exercise. I have a team of people who are going to go through your feedback. It will be documented in a consultation report. We have to identify all of the issues that you have raised in your feedback and show how we have had regard to those issues in the development of the final proposals. It might be that we're saying we've taken into consideration that issue, and this is the reason why we haven't incorporated it in our final design, but we have to give a reason. So when people say this is just a tick box exercise, the amount of time and resource that goes into going through all of that feedback is significant, and it's documented.
And I think decisions are made off the back of it as well. Changes happen as a result of people's feedback, because a lot of these projects, people are coming to areas they don't know. This is the developer, and so they need that consultation, that feedback to help them actually get the project right. In the first place,
I think the general misconception is that people kind of crudely put, kind of believe it's almost like the X factor. The more people who object and say they don't support a scheme, the less likely it will be to come forward. Yeah. And the reality is that we're not there to mandate for yes or no, this scheme will be developed. We're here presenting proposals. Yeah. Someone else will make that decision. Mm-hmm. The developer is there first and foremost, say this is where we are, this is what we're proposing. What's important to you? What do you want us to take into consideration in designing this scheme? Yeah. So kind of the response, and it is difficult sometimes because people get upset and people don't like change, but the response to I'm not supportive of this project, go away, is, do you know what? Tick that box on the form. Make that clear, but don't just say I'm not supportive of this project and not provide us with any further feedback. Because in the event that this goes ahead, make sure you've flagged what's important to you and what those issues are. The developer's trying to come up with a set of proposals that treads as lightly as possible on the environment and the local communities it impacts. Yeah. So object to it. That is absolutely your right to object to this project. Yeah. However, in the event it comes forward, make sure you've had your say.
Yeah, and don't just say no.
Yes, yeah,
exactly. Okay, good. Okay, so the thing that I'm really excited about is that you're here at DM, and we are girding ourselves up to kind of, I say let the fireworks off, not quite like that, but we now have stakeholder engagement as a proper arm to our business, which I think is a real good shot in the arm for DM. I think it's really good news story. I hope it's also will be a good news story for our clients. I think you've been here 9 weeks, but you're already probably seeing that.
Yeah.
Living.
I mean, first of all, it's really exciting to be here. Yeah. Kind of like and sort of working as part of that same organisation, the same business, alongside lands, alongside environment and planning, and just working more collaboratively, as one team, rather than working in silos. I think the response from existing clients and contacts is kind of, I'm really interested in how this, what are the benefits, what are the efficiencies of having those teams aligned and working as one team, and just I've worked alongside Dalcour Maclaren, as I said, since about 2011 on North West Coast Connections, or the competition as well on different projects, because there's always a land element. And so whilst we understand and know how the different disciplines work, it's actually really interesting to come the other side of the wall and be able to start to identify those real opportunities to deliver efficiencies for data integration and to work leaner and smarter, so that we're delivering sort of added value for clients.
Yeah, I mean, I see a real positivity here in terms of when you work on a contract. A client will go, right, here, I've got this contract, I'll get consultant A, B, C, D, E and F in. And you and I have talked about this before, but there's always a little bit of a kind of consultant rub that goes on sometimes, and sometimes it can be very healthy, sometimes it can be very harmful, depending who the individuals are. There's a bit of kind of people overprotecting their areas of work. But where I see some real advantages here is I think, and you touched on it earlier, but I think both, particularly in the land and stakeholder engagement side, both of us can learn from each other.
Yeah.
I think, good example, I think there are letters that probably come out to landowners that probably could definitely be modernised and improved. But equally, I think there's probably some stakeholder engagement where maybe an agricultural liaison person would be far better at doing it than others. So I think there's some real synergies there that will pay off both and ultimately pay off for our clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can take it back a step. There's copy and content that goes in communications. It can always be refined. It can always be made kind of simpler. But by virtue of working together, because there's a crossover in those stakeholders as well. So some of the Section 44 consultees are being engaged within that sort of lands capacity, but they also, people who live in immediate vicinity of a project, they're members of the local community. Yeah. So they'll often be receiving communications from two separate parties. Yeah. By virtue of being sat with the lands teams and the land referencing teams, we can look at where there is crossover. Yeah. And when you receive two letters, and if they say something slightly different, and it's a project that you've got concerns about, often the detail of the project is quite technical. So the easiest thing to hang off is, well, you said this in one letter and that in another letter. And just that ability to go, do they need two communications? Can we not do this in one? And look at how we can refine things and pull them together. Do it once, do it right. Yeah. And have less kind of have potential to cause less friction, reduce the risk of friction and misunderstanding in a community.
I'm a true believer also. I think that particularly, I am a surveyor. I have to remind myself, but I am a surveyor. My experience is, if you get it wrong at the beginning, and that was almost that first contact, whether it be landowner or somebody in the community. Yeah. If you get it wrong, then you're stuffed. Yeah. You have to do something pretty remarkable to get them back on side again. And so that first point of contact is crucial. And I do think you've got to get it right. Yeah. And I think, we can both hold our hands up probably and say, generally we get it right, but there are areas we can improve.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't think I'm going to say anything different to the majority of people who work on these projects. Yeah. It's front end the process. The more time that is spent up front before you've even put your head above the parapet to say, I have a project. Yeah. It's always a value kind of doing those really kind of desktop research and getting, you know, boots on the ground sometimes to go into a community to understand what the lie of the land is, who your stakeholders are, where your detractors might lie, but also where your pockets of support might sit as well, because they do exist.
Yeah.
The majority of people who you engage with on a project tend to be opposing it, and they're the people who put their head above the parapet. And sometimes you have to take a step back and go, this is a few people shouting very loudly in a very small room. It's just an echo chamber. And those pockets of support do exist, but they will sit across the disciplines, and just front-ending that process and doing your groundwork and working alongside the lands team and the environment and planning teams collectively and collaboratively to do that. I think we can do it better. There will always be your detractors for projects, and there will always be some kind of issue that arises. But I think by front-ending that process, you can de-risk that to a certain extent.
Yeah. Well, Beth, I'm really excited you're here. I think there's some really exciting things that we're going to get to be able to work on in the future. And I think we've got the right person. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But I think we have got the right person. I mean, you are an extremely driven individual. There probably aren't many people who know you've rowed the Atlantic. You know, and that's quite a good marker in my book in terms of someone who's got steely determination. You know, but
dogged,
yes,
dogged and persistent.
But I think, you know, you fit our culture absolutely fantastically, and I think you know, for our clients, I hope it will now mean that actually in terms of the service they can get from us, it is that kind of one-stop shop. That we're trying to get to, so that actually we can make sure their projects are as seamless as we can make them for them, and very importantly for people who engage with them on their projects.
Yeah.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.